Yo, what's going on? Not here with a quick meta guide on the TBC Hunter, and yeah, it's about time given how absurdly powerful they are. As always, though, a little disclaimer: I make these videos in sections that I wanted to find them as a consumer, and these are first the PvE basics, spec, stats, raid gameplay, that kind of thing. Second, I'll finish up on the basics with a discussion on race choice before heading on to the strengths and limitations for the TBC Hunter, or put in other terms, why you might want to or not want to play Hunter in TBC. Finally, I'll touch on professions and PvP, but for all the detail possible, you may want to seek out more specialist guides after you've checked out this one, of course. With that said, let's get straight into the talents. Your default build for PvE as Beastmaster is 41-20-0, whilst for survival the default build will be 7-20-34 after a tiny bit of scaling. The 20 points that both share in the marksman tree are fairly straightforward. Lethal shots for an easy 5% crit, go for the throat and rapid killing for some passive love to your pet and rapid fire, followed by aim shot, but only so that we can take 5 out of 5 lethal shots for that easy crit damage boost. Road 2 has a key choice, however. One hunter in a raid needs to take improved hunter's mark, and this is usually the survival hunter, as they are essentially more of a support class, whilst Beastmaster hunters will usually go for efficiency as their survival friend will be applying improved mark. With that said though, you can come to your own arrangement with your fellow hunters and flex these around to suit your raid needs or individual desires, just to ensure that someone is bringing it. First, let's cover the remaining 41 for Beastmaster, because let's face it, most people are here because they're super interested in the spec for its big chart topping potential. We're going to start by taking 5 easy points in improved aspect of the Hawk as you'd expect, and then grabs the big boost from 2 out of 2 focused fire. You then need to take 3 utility points to get to Unleashed Fury in the third row, so you're taking 2 out of 2 improved Revive Pet and a singleton in Endurance Training. Following Unleashed Fury, we're going to take 5 out of 5 Ferocity for the flat 20% pet damage increase. We'll then take 2 out of 2 Bestial Discipline, both points in improved Men Pet, and Intimidation to get down to those final rows. And here we're going to take everything aside from cat-like reflexes and the 5th point in Frenzy. The reason this is cut is essentially you can chain Frenzy procs just fine without the 5th point, and that 5th point can then be moved to the 2nd point in Animal Handler for further pet damage increases. On the survival side of the coin, you'll start by taking 3 points in both Slayer talents, 3 in Hawkeye for some quality of life, and then 3 points in your choice of the second row. Essentially, they are all utility based and have relatively minor impacts on raid encounters. Then you'll take 5 out of 5 Survivalist just because it furthers you down the tree with the largest value with 10% increased health. You'll finally reach some damage increasing talents from this point. 3 out of 3 in Sure-Footed for a 3% hit, followed by 2 out of 2 Survival Instincts for 4% attack power, 3 out of 3 Killer Instinct for a flat 3% crit, and then we're on to the real juicy stuff that makes survival a really good spec. 5 out of 5 Lightning Reflexes for supreme agility values, and of course this will get us to 3 out of 3 Expose Weakness, the bread and butter of the spec for the raid. It's a fantastic debuff that is essential for a higher threat ceiling from your main tank and maximum physical damage from your peers. Next, you're going to place a single point into Thrill of the Hunt for some efficiency. From this point, you can place the remaining 7 points into 5 out of 5 improved aspect of the Hawk and 2 out of 2 focused fire, and this is the build you're going to end up at. However, very early on, it can be valuable to go down to readiness, as Master Tactician in the survival tree offers a lot of value when our stats are low. However, relatively quickly, you will utilize the standard build with the 7 points in Beastmaster that we've just discussed. So that's our spec. What kind of stats are actually important on gear? The short answer is that all stats are pretty good for hunters. Agility underpins the class as the key primary to stack, of course, but outside of that we care about a 9% total hit cap, which is fairly easy to achieve, and then of course we have haste and crit. Haste is a little bit better per point, but crit is no slouch either. I would be hesitant to give you an exact value at this stage until we have more sim tools available, but ultimately haste is a little bit better, but both do really well regardless. Hunters just scale really well, generally speaking. The biggest and certain difference between the two specs though is in terms of applying the chonkiest, technical term by the way, exposed weakness possible. To do this, Survival is seeking to stack agility to the moon even more so than Beastmaster. This means that in the case of Survival, some innocent looking items are actually very good, such as Badge of Tenacity thanks to the agility on use, which will double dip with a bunch of talents like Expose and Lightning Reflexes. On an individual basis, it might not be the best trinket possible, for example, but these quirky items perform very well from a rage perspective. Towards the end of the game, you'll encounter armor penetration, and it's very attractive for pretty much all physical damage dealers since it has increasing returns and comes in abundance compared to other stats at the same item budget. So whilst its per point value is low, it often starts to become the dominant secondary on most of your pieces for this reason. Now with that brief summary, we're on to the gameplay, and initially you would think Hunter is exceptionally simple thanks to all the one button macro talk surrounding the class, but after some digging it appears there's some genuine gameplay to be had. The baseline is weaving your auto shots with steady shots in such a way that your swing timer is progressing but very rarely or never delayed by the completion of a steady shot, very much like how aim shot is currently done in Vanilla Classic. Alongside this, you're going to want to mash kill command whenever it becomes available. Notably, multi-shot is more DPS than steady shot when it is off cooldown. As such, you'll want to multi-shot in place of a steady shot when it's available. The reason this is not in the macro is because the macro cannot perform multi-shot within the conditions it needs for the rest of the macro to work. This is a notable DPS increase, particularly before the tier 6 set bonus. On top of this multi-shot nuance, weapon speed and current haste values will have an important impact on how exactly you weave your autos with your steadies. Whether it is one steady shot between each auto, or two steadies between autos with a slight clip, or even three steadies woven between two autos, it appears that sims are pointing towards a 2 steady or 1 steady to 1 auto ratio, as the best weapons are slower, with things like Lust or late game haste values dropping it down to 1 steady per auto. I would keep an eye on the Hunt Discord to confirm as we get a beta client for final calculations to be done. Essentially, the exact implementation of spell queuing in the TBC Classic client we get will have some impact on exactly how we do this as a hunter. So again, keep your eyes peeled on the Discord. In terms of the mid-combat haste changes with Lust, etc., I do suspect someone will develop a weak aura, so you don't have to do any maths mid-combat on how many steadies exactly you should be fitting inside your autos. With that said, let's cover races now. Horde side, both Ore Control are very good options. The difference isn't too big, especially if you can find a way to lower your HP to ensure that Berserking gives you more than the 10% haste minimum. However, in most situations, Blood Fury and the 5% pet damage will be pulling ahead. Alliance side, Draenei is the best option for both Beastmaster and Survival. Typically in the groups each spec is placed in, they will usually not contain the melee hit variant of the Draenei racial heroic presence, which is provided by Draenei hunters, paladins and warriors. Assuming your party is factoring in the additional hit in their gearing, it's a good DPS boost for both yourself and them. Now, you may look at the Dwarf gun racial and think, hey, 1% crit for free is pretty nice. The real problem with it though is that at each content tier, bows and crossbows are typically way better than the guns available, just based on stat budgets and design. PvP wise, you're going to be looking at Orc or Tauren as Horde. War Stomp's pretty nice and the HP bonus doesn't hurt either. That said, the Orc racial can remove 5 stacks of wound poison due to an interaction with the downside to Blood Fury, so that's some additional value on top of the cooldown and 15% stun resistance. Alliance side though, there is no real debate. Dwarf is the very clear choice for Alliance. Stoneform is just really strong into Rogues, which will be a very common occurrence in Arena. So now we're at the juice, right? Get the straws out. Hunter. What's good? Well, if you've seen the Warlock Quick Meta Guide, you'll know to expect a little dash of degen here. The biggest strength and reason to play Hunter is that they just all over the meters as Beastmaster. There is literally nothing to say other than it's a low effort, stress-free massacre of the DPS meters when it's a single target encounter. The part that people do miss the most though for both specs is how much utility they bring. First, let's cover a talent that I tried to avoid discussing earlier. 3% damage for all your party when your pet crits. Sounds pretty good, but nothing crazy. But there's small print to the terms and conditions of this buff. They stack with each hunter. So in short, your group is often getting 9% increased damage because typically you'll have a triple Beastmaster group for blasting hard. Pretty dumb, huh? Let's not leave out the survivalists though. Whilst the DPS output isn't quite at the same level, especially given that they get cucked into a support or melee group usually with minimal party buffs to their damage, Survival is providing the raid over 150 attack power in phase 1 gear without raid buffs factored in. So in this case, the meters lie in quite a big way in regards to how much of a DPS contribution Survival provides. Most specs have a unique buff or debuff that emphasizes that the meters aren't the full picture, but it's particularly true for the Survival Hunter. Someone has to do it, and they are a big gain for any composition utilizing a reasonable amount of physical damage. I could legitimately go on in terms of good reasons to play Hunter, but we would legitimately be here all day. Let me just summarize by saying usually I'd note a moment of glory here, but how do you do that when the class has moments of glory every time it's a single target encounter? This brings me to the downsides, and naturally there's a couple, but it's pretty hard to dunk on a class this powerful. First things first, and whilst it's hardly a legitimate downside, is that Hunters will be very popular. Along with Warlocks, they are the tastiest of the tasty, the flavour of the entire expansion. Expect some competition for raid spots, despite that raid leaders will take at least 3 Hunters. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly as far as your class choice decision is concerned, is that Hunter AoE damage is kinda doo-doo. Hunter is very much a single target specialist in terms of providing damage. If you love insane AoE damage, you're looking at the wrong class. Head over to Destrolock or Arcane Mage for that kind of nonsense. This brings us to professions now, and since the last quick meta guide, leatherworking has been denounced by Blizzard as a false idol not worthy of our worship, but for hunters there is real merit still. Let's start with pre-raid gear. Now, I'm not a fan of pre-raid BIS lists in TBC. It's just so accessible to jump into Karazhan and get tier 4, it just doesn't seem worthwhile to me for most specs to bother, so I just want to go on record with that statement first. However, it's due diligence to tell you that both Ebon Netherscale and Primal Strike sets from leatherworking are technically pre-BIS, depending on how much hit you want to gear for. Assuming you have a Boomy, Primal Strike is certainly the choice, and if you want security against Boomkin shortages, Netherscale is the go-to. But for real, don't take leatherworking for this reason, at least in my opinion. In the wake of the coup upon our Supreme Leader though, Jewel Crafting provides a slightly better gem, which is sadly not agility, but is still decent at 26 AP, and the best Beastmastery neck in the game, once we get the pattern from somewhere. Enchanting provides plus 8 all stats across the board. Whilst that's nothing special for Hunter compared to say for Ferals or other melee specs, it's still a nice freebie that's guaranteed across all tiers of content. Blacksmithing also requires a small mention. Master Axesmith provides you with strong stat sticks through to tier 5, which are close to the best option at each time they're available, if you choose to go this route, but it's a very expensive method to get a relatively small gain again. To summarise, Hunter is definitely one of the few classes where professions feel a little less impactful. so you're not missing out too badly if you want to avoid double crafting or just prefer something like alchemy for quality of life. With that said, we're on to PvP. Now I want to highlight that hunters can be capable of strong performance, but it definitely doesn't come as easy in arenas compared to say rogues or warlocks. At low ratings and in early seasons, it seems to be feasible to nuke an average player with just your pet via intimidation and bestial wrath as they hide behind a pillar. But generally, you're going to see the best PvP period when marksman gearing picks up around Season 3. And this is centered around abusing Viper Sting and Silencing Shot, which from recent experience on the Endless Tournament realm, I can say is a very frustrating experience, even when you can dispel it. For 2s, the most successful hunter composition is most definitely Resto Druid Hunter, again abusing Viper Sting quite heavily and out-resourcing your opponents as a primary method to win the game. For 3s, I'll be honest, I'm a little less certain here. It seems that many compositions work, including some combination of Warlock, Rogue, Disc Priest or Resto Druid, but I did come across a disgusting composition highlighted by Biosparks TV, which I've put the link in the description to, and that is Priest, Hunter, Druid. It's essentially double healer warrior, except you replace the warrior with the marksman MS effect instead. This paired with the ability to drain mana and provide a ranged silence leads to a very resource centered battle against your opponent. From what I can gather, your best route is going to be 2s typically with the Resto Druid, but it seems good hunters can make a variety of things work once marksmanship is in a decent spot. With that said though, those are my limited observations from the information I could find. For a more nuanced take, you may want to look for a specialist PvP hunter, as mentioned at the start of the video. This brings us to the end of the video though. Let me know how you found this overview into hunter life in TBC. Are you now planning to blast the meters with hunter, or do the numbers not tempt you? On that thought, I'll see you next time, hopefully in your notifications.